Welcome to Audit the Audit, where we sort out the who and what and the right and wrong of police interactions. This episode covers suspicious activity, identification laws, and officer conduct, and is brought to us by Civilians Channel. Be sure to check out the description below and give them the credit that they deserve. Before we dive into the interaction, I want to give a big thanks to the sponsor of this episode, Surfshark. The average person spends 6 to 8 hours a day online. The internet knows a lot about us, and that's why it is so important to care about the data you leave behind while surfing the web. And with identity theft becoming increasingly more common, protecting your data should be a top priority. Surfshark encrypts your personal information via a secure VPN tunnel that no one can access, not even Surfshark employees. Surfshark also allows you to access content that is not available in your country and offers an entirely different digital experience on websites like YouTube and Netflix. A Surfshark subscription also includes protection for your mobile devices, so you can be protected on the go. And right now, Surfshark is offering the ATA community an 85% discount with an additional 3 months free using the link in the description. That is the best price available in the VPN market. You can try Surfshark risk-free with their 30-day money-back guarantee. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description to get your exclusive offer now. Thanks again to Surfshark for sponsoring this episode. This is yet another interaction where the details are somewhat scarce, but what is apparent from the video is that the encounter took place in the town of Ottawa, Ohio, and the responding officers are from both the Ottawa Police Department and the Columbus Grove Police Department. It is also safe to assume that this video was filmed sometime in 2020, as Mr. Civilian makes a remark about social distancing. The Ottawa Police Department received a 911 call reporting 2 suspicious individuals, and the first officer on the scene is Officer Barganier from the OPD.
It's police department.
Can you identify yourself?
What was that?
Name and badge number, please.
Huh?
Name and badge number, please.
Officer Barganier, our police department.
What can I do for you?
Department, man.
I don't consent you to walk any further.
What was that?
I do not consent you to walk any further.
Okay. You got a gun?
I'm open carrying today, yes.
Okay. Well, I was just here because somebody called you guys in suspicious.
Okay, I'm just walking around exercising my First and Second Amendment rights.
Okay. All right, yeah, man. That's you got. What's your name, man?
I don't answer questions. Could you please identify yourself again, please?
Officer Barganier.
Badge number, please.
6973.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. So that's somebody thought you guys were suspicious, you know. So none major. Okay.
Nothing major at all. I have no ill will, no bad intentions towards anybody.
Okay. Do you have a? That's cool. Yeah, what's your name, man?
I don't answer questions. You can call me Good Citizen.
Good citizen. Okay. You live here?
I don't answer questions.
Why is that?
So I'm not legally obliged to answer any questions.
Okay. So do you live here or? I'm just asking, man.
I would prefer to remain silent.
Okay. All right.
Am I being detained?
You're not.
Okay. This is a consensual conversation.
What was that?
This is a consensual conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll allow you to proceed.
What was that?
I will allow you to proceed.
I appreciate it, man. I'm just trying to get your name, man. I like to know who I'm talking to.
You can call me Sir, Good Citizen, Boss Man, whatever applies.
Okay. Well, I mean, I know I share my information with you, so what's your information, man?
Well, you're legally obliged to because you're a public servant.
What was that?
You're legally obliged to provide information because you're a public servant on duty.
Do you live here, man? I'm just trying to get to know who I'm talking to, man. I like to know everybody.
I'm going to lock my door, close it.
Okay.
We're having a consensual conversation. I'm not being detained.
Okay. Everybody knows me, man, so I'm just trying to, I like to know who I'm talking to.
Yes, sir.
Huh?
Yes, sir.
So, what's your name, man? If I may ask.
Well, you've asked and I've answered. Again, I've got no ill intent, no ill will towards anybody. I've got a Second Amendment right to walk around with my firearm.
Okay.
That's all I'm doing. Literally all I'm doing.
That's what I'm trying to get to the bottom. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of it, man.
Yes, sir.
All right, I'm just trying to figure out who you are. You got a gun, which I applaud you, man. It's okay to have a gun.
Well, can I ask you something then?
What's that?
If you applaud me and you're aware that this is a Second Amendment right and
I got a call saying there was 2 suspicious males in all black, so...
Is suspicion a felony or a misdemeanor?
Although suspicious activity in and of itself does not constitute an arrestable offense, the Terry v. Ohio case established that suspicious activity can warrant an investigation by police. One of the most important aspects of suspicion is the context by which it is considered reasonable or unreasonable, and the Supreme Court has acknowledged that the concept of reasonable suspicion is not readily reduced to a neat set of legal rules. Instead, it requires an evaluation of the totality of the circumstances surrounding particularized interactions. The Supreme Court characterized reasonable suspicion as the sort of common-sense conclusion about human behavior upon which practical people are entitled to rely, thus rendering it inherently subjective. The reasonableness of an officer's suspicions are generally considered on a case-by-case basis, because the context of that suspicion plays such a dire role in determining its legality. Officer Barganier reveals later in the video that the call they received only mentioned that there were 2 individuals dressed in black with a camera. It is important to consider the implications of that description fulfilling the reasonable suspicion doctrine, as well as exploring the variability of the information at hand. For example, if dressing in black and carrying a camera in public did meet the requirements for reasonable suspicion, then anyone who wanted to carry a camera outside of their home would be forced to consider what clothing they were wearing for fear of being perceived as a potential threat. Now, let's examine the variability of the information. If wearing black and carrying a camera amounts to suspicion, what happens when you replace the camera with a briefcase? Or perhaps changing the clothing from black to blue? Changing the elements of the information does not change the context in which the information is presented. Acting on this information essentially amounts to policing what types of clothing can be associated with any particular item that an individual may be carrying, and disregards the notion of criminality. Without complementary information, which would imply that criminal activity could be present, such as being in a high crime area or actively avoiding detection, the report that the Ottawa officers are acting upon is unfounded and does not warrant investigation. All that said, Officer Barganier did the right thing by initiating a consensual conversation with Mr. Civilian, rather than assuming criminal activity was involved and detaining Mr. Civilian.
Depends what you're doing, man.
Well, no, suspicion is not a crime. Can I have your name and badge number, please?
My name?
And badge number, please.
It's 5'2".
Thank you. Officer Meyer, 5'2".
So yeah, man, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I was called in the area. All right.
Yes, sir.
So I don't know you. You now know me. I said my last name, badge number.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I know you as an officer of the law right now, so.
And I just like to know who I'm talking to, man. That's all.
Yes, sir. Have I committed a crime today?
Right now, it's an investigation right now, man.
Okay.
Okay.
And I've told you what I'm doing.
And you didn't tell me what you were doing.
Yes, I did. I'm walking around exercising my Second Amendment right. That's literally it. That's literally all I'm doing.
What's your name, buddy?
You can call me good citizen, sir, or boss man.
No, I won't call you either of those. You realize you have to identify yourself to a police officer?
Have I committed a crime today?
You have to identify yourself to a police officer.
Have I committed a crime? I'm not required.
Identification, yeah, you are committing a crime.
Ohio Revised Code 2921.29 clearly states that officers must reasonably suspect that an individual is committing, has committed, or is about to commit a criminal offense in order to demand identification. This code was drafted under the doctrine of the Terry case and does not apply retroactively as this officer is suggesting. Officers must first establish reasonable suspicion before they are lawfully authorized to demand identification. Citizens are protected from unreasonable intrusions into their personal privacy under the language of the Fourth Amendment. And what this officer is suggesting is contrary to the basic principles of both the Fourth Amendment and the concept of freedom as a whole. According to the officer's logic, any member of law enforcement should be able to identify any member of the public regardless of their involvement in criminal activity. And the implications of that notion draw many parallels to the Big Brother ideology that is essentially the antithesis of the freedoms that the Constitution was drafted to protect. The Fourth Amendment plays a major role in all aspects of policing, and such a grave misunderstanding of how identification laws function is certainly cause for concern.
Under what suspicion? What's your RAS?
We were called out for a suspicious call. That's what.
Right, is suspicion a misdemeanor or a felony?
You have to identify yourself with me on these calls, okay?
I'm not required to identify myself unless I've committed a crime.
Identify yourself. You are required by law if we ask you to identify yourself. Sir, don't look towards your gun.
No, I'm making sure we're 6 feet apart. I won't look down. I won't move my hands. My hands are up here.
Yeah, I see your hands. They're gonna stay there.
Yes, sir. Listen, I do not consent to any search or seizure. This is my Fourth Amendment right. But if it makes you more comfortable, I will not resist you seizing my property from me.
Your property? What are you talking about, man?
My firearm on my side right now.
Okay.
If it makes you feel more comfortable, I'm not allowing you to do so. But I will not resist at all if you decide you want to seize my property from me and just put it aside while we have this conversation so you feel more at ease.
How about, just give me your name, man, so I know who I'm talking to. I don't want to seize anything, all right?
Listen, we understand you have a Second Amendment right.
You have the right, look, you have the right to walk down these streets, you know. That's your right, man.
Yes, sir.
Camera and whatnot. I just got a call that there was 2 males wearing all black. There was no firearm in the description. I was just 2 males all black with a camera. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. And I happen to see you 2.
So,
buddy.
Which part of that is suspicious or illegal? Well, if I'm not committing a crime, then...
Well, how are we to know that you don't have a felony and you're carrying a weapon? If you don't identify yourself, how are we to know that you're not committing a crime?
Once again, this officer displays a fundamental misunderstanding of how the legal process operates. The American justice system was built on the premise that all suspects are considered innocent until proven guilty, and baseless assumptions bear no merit within that philosophy. Determining the criminality of an action must be based upon the evidence at hand, and the CGPD officer has no evidence to suggest that Mr. Civilian is illegally carrying a firearm.
What reasonable suspicion do you believe that I am committing a crime right now?
He told you right now what we're out here for, okay?
Right.
We are called for suspicion.
Second Amendment.
We are legally mandated to find out what the suspicious activity is, okay?
Yes.
So that's what we're out here doing.
Yes.
Now, you hindering an investigation, failing to identify yourself to a law enforcement officer.
Well, if I haven't committed a crime...
To comply with our investigation.
At some point during the encounter, Officer Barganier radioed for a supervisor, and the unmarked SUV pulling onto the scene is the supervisory officer on duty.
What was the original complaint?
Two suspicious males with a camera.
Okay.
Wearing all black, so that's all I got.
Well, black's just a color.
Okay. Were you on the sidewalk?
Yes, sir.
Did you try to go into buildings?
No, sir.
Were you just walking?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You didn't yell at anybody? Nothing
I
like
didn't
that?
say anything to anybody.
Okay. Who called this in? No clue? Okay.
I was just dispatched.
Where was he at when you approached?
They were right here.
Okay. Just him and another guy?
Yep. He locked the door. I believe this is a
Okay.
duplex or apartment.
Okay.
I'll tell you, I'll
I believe
explain.
our job here's done.
Yes, sir.
So,
Thank you. Could I have your name and badge number, please?
yeah, Officer Vance, 7-5.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Take care.
Yep, you guys have a great day.
It appears as though the officers left the scene without further incident, and Mr. Civilian was allowed to go free. Overall, Officer Barganier gets an A-, because although he did press Mr. Civilian for information that he was not legally entitled to, he never detained Mr. Civilian, and he did not overstep the bounds of his authority at any point. Members of law enforcement are free to engage with any citizen in a consensual encounter, and Officer Barganier did so in a reasonable manner. Officer Barganier approached Mr. Civilian with respectable degree of professionalism, and maintained a balance between carrying out his duties diligently and preserving Mr. Civilian's constitutionally protected rights. Officer Barganier also contacted a supervisor for further consultation, instead of taking the risk of making a mistake or escalating the encounter. I commend Officer Barganier for his patience and professionalism. The unnamed Columbus Grove officer gets an F for displaying a fundamental misunderstanding of the legal process, using accusational and inflammatory statements throughout the encounter, and baselessly insinuating that Mr. Civilian was a criminal. Although this officer did not step outside of his authority, it is clear that this interaction would have had a dramatically different outcome if he had been the primary officer. And such an egregious display of ignorance of the law is astounding for someone who is enforcing said law. This officer would do well to re-examine the very basics of law enforcement and gain a deeper understanding of civilian rights. Officer Vance and Mr. Civilian both get an A+. Mr. Civilian displayed a thorough understanding of his constitutionally protected rights, remained calm and collected throughout the encounter, and refused to surrender to the intimidation of the CGPD officer. Although this interaction was not necessarily an audit, Mr. Civilian displayed all the characteristics that a successful auditor should strive to acquire. Mr. Civilian exercised his rights peacefully and respectfully, without making incremental sacrifices in the face of adversity. I commend Mr. Civilian for doing his due diligence and conducting himself in a manner that reflects well on the constitutionally aware community as a whole. Officer Vance carried out his duties objectively and effectively, and did not waste any time or resources on a citizen engaged in exercising their rights. Officer Vance asked all the right questions necessary to quell any suspicions surrounding Mr. Civilian's actions, and managed to treat Mr. Civilian with dignity and respect without introducing ego into the encounter. I commend Officer Vance for bringing a swift end to the interaction and respecting the rights of Mr. Civilian. Let us know if there is an interaction or legal topic you would like us to cover in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more police interaction content.